I absolutely love clothing stats and watching other people's videos on this topic, so I decided to share my own. I used the app Wearing, where I digitized some of my clothes back in 2022. Never used it though until January 2025, so I will share my stats from the past 1.5 years since Wearing doesn't do yearly stats. Disclaimer, this is definitely not sponsored. I know a lot of people also use the app Index to track their clothing, and there are probably also other apps that do the same thing. I just picked the first one that came up on the App Store when I searched for a wardrobe app back in 2022. After 1.5 years, I have worn 95% of my closet. I was aiming for 100%, but for some clothes, I haven't found an occasion yet. Next, what's in my wardrobe? I have an item total of 350 items, including accessories. My closet consists of 54% new clothing. A bunch of these I've also owned since I was a teen. And 31% is pre-loved, which includes secondhand or hand-me-downs from my mom, for example. I don't rent clothes, so this stat will always probably stay at 0%. 10% is handmade by me, so my knitted or sewn items, and 5% is gifted, for example, Christmas presents or birthday presents. I'm not sure if I also included some hand-me-downs in this also. I don't find this stat to be particularly helpful, but here's a breakdown of how many items I own in each category. I wish they would keep it more broad by grouping all tops together or all bottoms together and not separate them out. For example, I think cargo pants are separate from jeans, so I would love to have them in a category together. Now to colors. These are my most worn colors, which apparently are black and white, but followed by different blue tones, some brown and green, and also gold, which is the yellow color in here, probably because of my accessories. I would also love to see in the future a breakdown of which colors I wear most in addition to this stat. Next is an overview of my 10 most worn items in the last year and a half. This mostly consists of accessories, shoes, and jackets, which makes sense since I wear those items more often in a row than regular clothing items. One pair of pants, though, have made it in this list, since I wear it so often that I have to sometimes remind myself to give other pairs some love. As you can tell, there's also the information about the cost per wear, but I don't really pay attention to it since for most items it is not accurate because I've owned them before I've started using the app. It only makes sense to pay attention to it for items I have added in the last year and a half. Now I want to give an overview of each item categories for most worn items, which for accessories is a little boring as most of them were in the 10 most worn items. But I would like to say that the 2 most worn scarves are the ones I made myself, so I'm glad about that. These are my most worn bags, my most worn bottoms, my most worn footwear, my most worn full body items. The one on the bottom right is actually a jumpsuit I wear to dance classes, if you were wondering, so it's not something I wear in my daily life. This is my most worn outerwear, so jackets, and these are my most worn tops. I have come to the conclusion that my most worn pieces are the most boring ones, which I combine with a bunch of different items. And for tops, I think it makes sense that the top 2 most worn ones are cardigans that I can easily layer on top of other clothing pieces. The app lets you archive items which you don't own anymore or that are put in storage, but I use it only for clothing that has left my closet, and I've archived 42 pieces of clothing, and I have calculated myself the reasons why and their respective frequency. So the most clothing left my closet through clothing swaps, which consists of 37%. 33% of my archive clothes had to be thrown out. This was sadly because I had some water damage last year, so that is also why the number is so large. And then other clothing items I had to throw out because the fabric was falling apart and literally unsalvageable. 15% of items I sold, and another 15% I upcycled and added back in as a new item. The app now has this new thing where it shows a 3-month recap of the last couple of months. I will now show you what edition 1, January to March, entailed. Apparently, I wore 122 items, which seems to be about a third of my closet and is consistent with last time being October to December. I added 15 new items to my wardrobe, 20% of which were pre-loved and 27% were gifted, which makes sense since it had just been Christmas. In comparison, I only added 5 new items from October to December. Now, as I said, I don't really pay attention to cost per wear, but I wanted to include this stat anyways, in case someone else might be interested. So these are the categories in which I have the lowest average cost per wear, which are bags, accessories, and tops. And my average cost per wear in these 3 categories is the highest, which are full body, outerwear, and bottoms. I actually rarely wear dresses, so it makes sense that this category has the highest cost per wear. Here are my most worn items in January to March compared to October to December. As you can see, I love wearing the same pair of earrings almost every single day, and the rest are just the shoes/jacket or bag I wore the most. These are the clothing items I wore the least, all of which I wore one time each. Here we have my most worn brands. I was thinking of adding handmade as a label to the items I made myself because I think it might be interesting in the future to see if this category or this brand would show up in here and how often I wear my handmade items. And last but not least, here are my most worn outfits from January to March and October to December. As you can hopefully tell, I don't only wear boring colors all the time. This is all still very wintry, but I'm excited to see what changes next time. And if you can tell that there has been a seasonal change in the quarterly recap, which is due, I guess, after June ends. I hope you enjoyed these stats. I might do a video like this in the future to see what changed, and if you'd like to stick around for that, feel free to subscribe and also like the video if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.